Friday night in Minneapolis, Minnesota is a touchdown underdog at home, and the Gophers have quietly won 5 straight over Nebraska. Something's got to give. The Cornhuskers are rolling. The Gophers are still searching for their identity. And Vegas says Nebraska by 7.5. I'm your host, Nathan Johnston, alongside Brad Hopkins. It's time to break the huddle. Brad, when we get into this game, this is a marquee matchup on Friday night. A lot of eyes are going to be on this game, along with Louisville at Miami. We'll talk about that one a little bit later on in the week. But for this game, in context, Big Ten primetime matchup, 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. Gophers enter this game 4-2, Huskers 5-1. Nebraska got a huge win last week on the road at Maryland. We both thought Dylan Raiola and them would pull it out. They did. And one thing I think is become true this year, and that's the fact that, hey, Nebraska can win close games. That's something that we've talked about for years now. Nebraska can't finish when it matters most in the fourth quarter. Now enter this year, they get a close win against Cincinnati. They get a close win against Maryland. Can they get on track and continue that road win streak as they take on the Minnesota Gophers? My question for you, Brad, is when you look at this line at 7.5, 6.5, whatever you want to call it, they get opened up at 6, as I have it here on the screen. Nebraska favored by a touchdown on the road. Is that more of a reflection of what Nebraska's done so far, or what Minnesota hasn't proven yet?
Yeah, Nate, I think it's definitely an indication of Nebraska. And you made a really, really good point. Nebraska has just grinded out wins, and they found a way to get it done. I was impressed with them last Saturday in College Park, Maryland. Just a ugly game. Dylan Raiola did not play very well, but they found a way to win. And I mean, that's kind of typical of a Matt Rhule team, right? They've got some playmakers, they've got some guys, but I think it's just, they're a blue collar team. They put their hard hats on and they come to play. And PJ Fleck's got a good squad this year in Minnesota, but I love what Matt Rhule and Nebraska's doing. They have a set of games here before a big showdown with USC coming up in a few weeks, and
that's gonna be a fun one.
If Nebraska can continue this run, that USC game becomes very, very big. And Nate, not to jump too much ahead, but I think if Nebraska can keep this thing going, I'm still going to say this. They're a dark horse playoff contender. I still think the offense has got to improve, but I love what they're doing defensively. And Matt Rhule's a great coach. So this is a big Friday night matchup. I know you brought up a good point in our predictions last week. Weird stuff happens on Friday night, and it's going to be chilly weather, I imagine. It's going to be cool. It's going to be a great atmosphere, but we've seen some weird stuff happen on Friday night games this year.
Yeah, and Nebraska, I think, is going to be ready for the test, right? PJ Fleck has a good squad, like you mentioned. They've got a good team. They're still trying to figure out their identity. Let's talk about Minnesota for a second and recap. Last week, they make it against Purdue with a very close win, comeback win, 27-20. Second double-digit comeback in 3 weeks for the Minnesota Gophers. Drake Lindsay at quarterback, 232 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception last week. And then Darius Taylor was bottled up, only 32 yards on 14 carries. They've got to get that figured out if they're going to have a chance on Friday night. Lemke Brockington, a bright spot for the Gophers, 61 yards and a touchdown. Gophers are 1-4 and 1 against the spread. Only cover came against the FCS team in Northwestern State. Wins are wins, but the inconsistencies, especially on offense, are still glaring to me.
Yeah.
So, Brad, my question to you is, Minnesota's offense has looked out of sync for weeks. When you watch Drake Lindsay, do you see a quarterback still finding himself, or do you think this is the time? This is more about play calling and protection for Minnesota.
Nate, I think,
or maybe a little bit of both.
I think Minnesota needs to put their identity on. Let's feed Darius Taylor. He is a great running back. Minnesota has been known for being physical. They've been known for good offensive line play in PJ Fleck's tenure there in Minnesota. Nate, to me, Darius Taylor's a guy that you give him 25, maybe 30 carries and let him go to work. And, there's been a lot of good and bad offensive play. And I think Drake Lindsey, I think he's been okay, but to me, Minnesota needs to just get downhill, get physical. They've got a tall task with a very, very good Nebraska front seven, but pound the rock, man. Just give it to this guy. Let him be your bell cow and let him go to work.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to see a Minnesota team on Friday and go, whoa, that's a top 5 quarterback in the nation. So to your point, they've got to feed the ball to the running backs, and they've got to get the run game going. This should be a run first team. You're not going to have world beaters on the outside. You're not going to have this unbelievable quarterback play from Drake Lindsey, even though he can be consistent.
Yeah.
So you've got to get the tight ends involved. You got to get the running backs involved. You got to play what we call Big Ten football. Yeah. We've talked about Big Ten football, and what we've watched growing up in Big Ten football, they run. You think about the great running backs. You think of Wisconsin. You think of Minnesota. You think of Ohio State. Like, yes, there's other teams in other conferences, but when you're talking about the Big Ten specifically, they've always been known for big linemen up front and big running backs that have a little bit of speed to get around the edge as well. Very curious to see how that plays out. And then we turn it over to Nebraska's surge and momentum this year. Nebraska 5-1, 2-1 in the Big Ten, bounced back strong after the Michigan loss. Dylan Raiola, 260 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, and 3 picks versus Maryland. Not the greatest performance. But as you can tell, and we talked about this, he's not afraid to sling the ball. He's not afraid to let it loose. And I think that's exactly what Matt Rhule wants him to do. He wants him to make mistakes and learn from them. If you don't even try to make success, you're not going to have the chance to fail and get better. I like what they're doing there. Emmett Johnson, just a dynamic running back, 176 yards, averaging 8.4 yards per carry. And then Neziah Hunter, 5 catches, 125 yards, 2 touchdowns. They've got a balanced attack, Brad.
Yeah.
And this is something that we were expecting from Nebraska early on. And as the season progresses, they fumbled the bag, so to speak, against Michigan, had a chance to win it there. But this is still a good football team. Matt Rhule has the Huskers trending upward with physicality and depth. So he's got them exactly where he wants them to be. And he's got them flying under the radar, which is exactly where he wants them to be as well. This is the most balanced Nebraska offense we've seen in years, Brad, but the mistakes are still haunting them. Can they fix those mistakes? You look at Dylan Raiola's stat line, 4 touchdowns, 3 picks. You mentioned it. Not the best game. Do you chalk that up to a young quarterback still learning, or is this a high-risk, high-reward system, as I think it is for under Matt Rhule?
High-risk, high-reward with Dylan. And Nate, you pointed out, putting him as a young quarterback, I don't know that we can give him that title anymore because he's halfway through his sophomore year. To me on paper, he's a junior pretty much. Right?
Yeah.
Yes, he's still young. He's about 19, 20 starts into his college career. He's got to cut down in terms. Nate, we just talked about Darius Taylor in Minnesota. Nebraska's got a stud in Emmett Johnson, and I would be feeding him. And I think Dana Holgorsen is going to do that. What's tough, though, is you've got an unbelievable group of receivers, in my opinion, for Nebraska. You mentioned Neziah Hunter. I'm a huge Dane Key fan who transferred over from Kentucky. Ja'Cory Barney is there, too. I'm interested to see how this Nebraska offensive line looks. Some of the struggles I think could be to, Dylan maybe not trusting that pocket at times and maybe not trusting the blocking, but something's got to give. He's got to clean it up. He's been pretty clean up until last Saturday, but he's got to continue to trend upward. I think Dana Holgorsen's going to continue to get the best out of him, continue to let him grow. But my final point before I turn it back over to you, I really, really think if Emmett Johnson's going to keep up putting those stat lines, you got to feed him as well.
I agree completely. You've got to get them in a position to get that balanced attack. I'm going to throw this out here. We saw Texas be able to do that.
Yes, that's a good point.
I thought one of the greatest points was made by, shout out Jake Crane and Crane and Company, one of the best sports shows out there. They cover college football very, very well, and I've been watching them for years. He said it, oh my gosh, It's amazing how good Arch Manning looks when you actually have a balanced running attack. And that's what they've done here with Dylan Raiola. Matt Rhule is no newbie to the game of college football or football in general. He knows what's going to make Dylan Raiola successful, and he knows what's going to make him fail. And what they've done is they've surrounded him with great receivers, a really good, solid offensive line. May not be the best in the country, but they know how to block, and they know how to hold blocks long enough to let Dylan Raiola sit back there in the pocket and make the throws that he needs to make. At that point, it's up to him to make the throw.
Yes.
But you got to give him the opportunities. And we saw that with Arch Manning versus Oklahoma, and they just absolutely dominated Oklahoma, regardless of the play of John Mateer. So I think that's what Nebraska is trying to do here against Minnesota. When you look at the matchup breakdown, the strengths and keys to winning this football game, Nebraska's run game, you mentioned it, Johnson plus the O-line. We talked very heavily about that. Versus Minnesota's front seven, who's been really good this year against the run. Gophers must slow the tempo down and win time of possession. That's going to be hard to do if Minnesota can't run this ball.
Absolutely.
If Minnesota gets bottled up in the backfield, it's going to be a long day for the Gophers, even at home. It's going to be an interesting matchup up front. Short week favors the team that tackles and travels better, which I think goes to Nebraska at this point. They've got a very, very good defense heading into this year, and they've proven themselves on the road and in close games. They got it done against Cincy. They came up with a late interception. They make a comeback last week against Maryland, and now they've got a chance to maybe get ahead this game against Minnesota Friday night. Minnesota's secondary versus deep shots from Raiola. You know he's going to throw it. He's going to go for Dan Key. Mm-hmm. He's going to go for Jacory. He's going to go for his other guys. He's going to get this deep ball going early. I think they're going to take a few shots early in this game. Why wouldn't you? It's Friday night. Maybe they throw in a few razzle-dazzle trick plays. In a short week, that's the time to really throw in those odd play calls that you wouldn't see any other night, because the other team's not going to be expecting it, and they're not going to be preparing for it. They're going to be doing the best they can with what they have in a short week. History favors Minnesota. 5 straight wins since 2019, which is crazy to think about. Last Nebraska win in Minneapolis was 2015. Wow. It's been 10 years, Brad. This is a toughness game right here. Whoever wins in the trenches probably walks out with the win. The question to you, Brad, is when you look at these two styles of teams, Nebraska's downhill run game versus Minnesota's methodical, grinded out approach, which identity holds up better on a short week, you think?
I think it's going to be Nebraska, and the only reason I say that is I think Nebraska, from a defensive standpoint, is better up front than Minnesota, and I think Minnesota's still got a decent front seven. I really, once again, I like what Matt Rhule's doing, and I'm looking at. I think Emmett Johnson's going to have another big game Friday night. To me, this is not really a quarterback matchup. This is Darius Taylor versus Emmett Johnson.
To me, this is a huge game for Matt Rhule, and I don't mean to go off the record here, but we talked pre-show about Matt Rhule and the tie he has to Penn State and all the rumors going on right now after James Franklin getting fired. Listen, this is a huge game for Nebraska on Friday night, because if they do not win this game, there is going to be a lot of conversation and a lot of media hype about, Matt Rhule is already looking ahead to the Penn State job. This is a big game in my eyes for Nebraska to say, hey, I'm still here to coach Nebraska, and we're still on track to make a potential playoff run, if not finish out the year with 9+ wins, which would be a huge season for the Nebraska Cornhuskers. They've got to stay focused. They've got to stay locked in. I saw Dylan Raiola post on social media today a picture of him and Coach Rhule together with a heart emoji and a lock next to it. So they're locked in from what it seems like on social media. And Dylan Raiola tends to be very transparent on social media and very genuine and honest too. So I think they're still locked in, but I just want to make that point before we head into our predictions. Nebraska entered this week favored by 6. Now it's up to 7.5. Over under 46.5. Minnesota's poor against the spread record versus Nebraska's offensive rhythm improving. Minnesota at home, will they have the emotional edge with PJ Fleck rowing the boat? Nebraska's defense quietly allowing 22 points per game. Minnesota 19 points per game on defense. Brad, who do you have coming out on top in Minneapolis, Minnesota on Friday night.
I'm going to give a score prediction in this one.
Okay.
Something I don't do a whole lot. I'm going to go Nebraska 24-14.
Low score.
I think it's a low scoring game. I think we're looking at two good defenses. And once again, Nate, Friday night games are just kind of weird. I think really what it comes down to is I think Emmett Johnson has a really, really solid game. I think ultimately those Nebraska receivers start to get some separation and make plays. And I think Nebraska is going to absolutely sell out to stop Darius Taylor in the running game. And Minnesota just does not have enough of a dynamic passing attack, and they don't score enough points. I think it's a very physical game. I think it's going to be a close game up until early fourth quarter. Nebraska just finds a couple of explosives and wins this one.
You said
24-14.
24-14. Yep. Okay. I'm going to go Nebraska, and I'm going to say 27-17.
Okay.
I think they score a little bit more points, but I think this is one of those games where Matt Rhule and that offense under Dylan Raiola at quarterback gets out quickly. Mm-hmm. I think in third, fourth quarter, you're going to see hands on the hips for Minnesota defenders because they're going to be gassed, man. This is an offense that needs to get explosive quickly. You got to get the ball to Dane King. You got to get it to Ja'Cory. You got to get it to those guys early. Get that 10, 14 point jump and have Minnesota playing from behind because when you put them in that, it takes them out of rhythm, gets them away from what they're good at. And then Drake Lindsey's going to have to throw the ball into some tight situations that he's probably not as confident in as Dylan Raiola. So give me Nebraska to win on the road, 27-17. Jake and I will be breaking this down for you live on Friday night on Break the Huddle After Dark. Check it out. Be sure to tune in early, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Game starts at 8. And we'll see you then on Friday night. Be sure to hit that subscribe button down below. Help us to get to 1,000 subscribers. We really appreciate all the support thus far. We're all closing in on 700 subs. We're almost there. Help us get to 1,000. We'll see you on Friday night. It's time to break the huddle.